Hello, hello. Aloha, everybody. Welcome. I'm Chad Blair of Civil Beat, and this is our first installment of 3 Civil Cafes. Our legislative preview is today. We will have another Civil Cafe at the midway point on May 7th. We'll have a different lineup than the folks that are here today. And then the wrap will be on May the 7th, in which hopefully we'll get the top leaders here. I do want to say thank you to the state legislature for allowing us to be here. We think it's a very good space. How is the parking, everybody? Fine. Good. That's good to hear. I have an update. You probably heard that they were going to close the parking to the public downstairs. They haven't done that yet. I was talking to Daryl Huff the other day, and we're not live, by the way, but we are going to be recording. And he's hearing now that they may hold off on that until after session, which makes a lot of sense. But the idea would then to make room available for the public somewhere at the Department of Health, where there actually is some public parking right now. So just let you know, it sure is helpful, particularly when it's raining. But that's the latest I'm hearing from DAGs. We'll keep you posted if there is an update. How was the metal detector? Not so bad? You got through it? Okay. That's a big change, I think, for somebody. Hi, Capson. Can I identify you correctly this time? Good to see old friends. I do want to welcome the striking nurses from Kaiser. Hello, everybody. Whoops. Oh, that's right, because I see you guys when I drive up Punahou, and you guys are making all that noise there, I hear. Yeah. Okay. I'm hearing a lot of horns in your support, so thank you for joining us. I definitely want to just very quickly say a big mahalo to our guest today, Senator Cress Lee, who represents, Kailua, Kaneohe? No, Kailua, Waikai? Waimanalo, okay. District 25, is that right?
Yep.
Okay, good.
Best
yeah. A shout out for the windward side. Majority Leader Nadine Nakamura, a representative from Kauai. I forget which district, sorry.
District 15 from Wailua to Haena.
Y'all could hear her real good, right? That's a beautiful side. I like that side.
It's beautiful.
And speaking of beautiful, in fact, the three of you have pretty much the most beautiful districts in so many ways. Yeah. Senator Brenton Awa, his district, I believe geographically is the largest, is it not? District 23? On Oahu. And tell us where that runs to.
We've got part of Kaneohe. We run north to Kahuku, all the way, the whole North Shore out to Mokulea and up to Schofield, Kunia area.
I am going to ask some questions about the lawmakers' districts later on. The way this is going to work is I'm going to make some opening remarks, and then I'm going to shift to each of our guests today. I think we'll start with Nadine Nakamura, and then we'll go to Chris Lee, and then to Brenton. And I'm just going to call you by your first name, if that's okay. I know I've known Chris and Brenton for a long time, less so with Nadine, but it just, I think, makes it more comfortable. Although Jay Kalani English was mad at me a couple of years ago because we left the J off of his title, and I think we didn't say majority leader. But anyway, Kalani couldn't be with us today, but that's another story. I'm then going to follow up respectively with a few questions after each of our lawmakers talk about what's top of mind for their caucus. I have a bunch of questions that came in beforehand, and they're good questions. I got to compliment you folks that went ahead and emailed them in. I'd say 90% of them are very terrific questions. I'm hoping to get to them all. I then will follow up with a few individual questions asking about your district and your particular bills this year. And then we got a bunch of other questions. And finally, if you want to ask a question today, correct me if I'm wrong, Ashley and Megan, but we have these little index cards. Is that right? Great. So make it as simple as you can. Marijuana, yes, no, or something like that. Make it cesspools. WTF, help us make it clear, because if you have to write out a long thing, it's not going to make it into my computer here. And if you see me looking at my computer, it's because they got me on a Slack channel sending your questions to me. And then we'll end with some final remarks. We'll see if we go over an hour or so. We'll try and keep respectful for your time. But without further ado, I thought I'd just point out a couple of things. Anybody who reads Civil Beat or the Star Advertiser, who follows the local media, HPR, Hawaii News Now, our media partner, knows that Maui is very much top of mind at the legislature this year, as is affordable housing. And in many ways, they dovetail, don't they? So many people are still without homes in the Lahaina area, living in hotels. I know Nadine has a lot to say about affordable housing. We'll talk about that a little bit more, but I'm getting the sense that this is going to be an historic session. I can just kind of feel it. It is an election year, but I'm less worried about that. I've looked over half the bills so far. I have not gotten through the rest, but a lot of them are very substantive, very detailed. There's also a lot of short form bills I notice, which, as I understand it, if it's a short form, it means you can go in later and use that to add things and make a new bill, as long as it honors the subject title, right? Or the subject area, housing or the environment, whatever the case may be. That makes me think that the lawmakers are being flexible going forward, because you never know what's going to come up. So I get the sense it's going to be a very historic session. I do also want to remind everybody how wonderful it is and compliment the legislature for broadcasting, streaming their hearings. That has made a world of difference, not only for folks on the neighbor islands who can't come over here, or folks on the Windward or the North Shore who find it to be a long drive. Even journalists like me, it's a lot easier to be able to watch on screen. And not only that, it's recorded and it's archived, and you can go back and do that. It's amazing that it took COVID for us to shift into that realm, but it really is terrific. I think that's a great public service for us all. I will also say this: expect the unexpected. There's always something you don't see coming. I don't know what the bill was last year, the issue, but I would say it was probably the budget. I would probably say it was the inability or the disagreement, particularly in the House, to settle on a budget, or rather to pass a budget without having a lot of people know what's in there. I know in particular a lot of Nadine's colleagues were very concerned about that. Education was shortchanged, a few other things. I will say that leadership on both sides has agreed to set an earlier deadline for final budget decking. I believe that's the April the 22nd, I think. It's right around conference committee. The idea is to get general agreement on the budget before you really move into that last phase. Remember the cattle call from last year? That was that terrible slaughter, to use that word. I could think of other words probably, but it was pretty brutal to watch all those bills die in the waning days. Well, the legislature, the leadership has also built in some buffer days, some recess days, including one during conference committee, and I think some right after conference committee, prior to the final voting day, which I think is a good idea. It gives, I think, a little time to sort of cool off, catch your breath, read the bill that you haven't read before you vote on it for that final time. And of course, this has necessitated moving the final day to a Friday. It won't be on a Thursday this year. It'll be Friday, May 3rd, which I think will be a terrific pauhana for so many different people. So that's a great thing. And then one other thing, I always say expect the unexpected. I don't know what it's going to be. Nobody ever knows, but I couldn't help but notice a bill that came over the transit real recently. It comes from Carl Rhodes, the state senator who runs Judiciary Committee. And for lack of better words, I guess it would be the anti-Donald Trump bill. It does reference Section 3 of the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. I think you're familiar with what that is. Colorado and Maine and other states are now asking questions whether somebody who violated a constitutional provision that goes back to the Civil War should be disqualified for being, for essentially trying to overthrow the government. I'm not going to answer that question. The U.S. Supreme Court will answer that question, hopefully pretty soon. Basically, it would disqualify candidates from the ballot if there's some sort of constitutional or even a statutory provision. The Hawaii Republican Party has already put out a very strongly worded statement, very upset with this. I'm not sure whether it passed or whether it will go into effect. Have any of you guys seen the bill yet? It's okay if you haven't. I would assume if it's going to affect the ballot this year, it would need to pass and have an effective date of July 1st or immediate. But we'll see how that goes. But that is a very interesting thing. Another example of how you just never know what's going to come out of this building, I think. So I think with that, I'm now going to turn my attention. I think we'll start with Nadine Nakamura and take 5 or 7 minutes to tell us what's top of mind for the Democrats in the Hawaii House of Representatives.
Thank you. Thanks, Chad, for that introduction. Wanted to welcome everybody to the state capitol. For the House majority, we have 2 sets of bills this session. The first is the Maui bipartisan wildfire bills. And following the wildfire, Speaker Saiki set up 6 working committees to take a look at all the different issues arising out of the wildfire, asking the question, what are some of the needs that we need to address immediately? And also, what can we learn from this so that we can do better as a state? And out of that discussion, the 6 working groups went to work, tried to stay out of the way of all of the first responders on the ground doing the work, but came up with some very good recommendations. And out of the recommendations, we looked at some of the turned them into bills, the ones that we thought would be actionable, things that had broad community support. And so some of those that come to mind that I'd like to describe to you include a lot relating to wildfire prevention. And for all of the legislators, we're all looking at our own communities to see, these are some potential hazards. So we really would like to give the Department of Land and Natural Resources, the fire prevention section, the resources they need, some of the equipment and staffing to really prevent future wildfires, especially those that are adjacent to communities. We are the only state that does not have a state fire marshal, so it's time to staff that we have a council of all of the fire chiefs from every county, but we need to have a state office. So we're going to work on that bill, and then another bill to make sure that we have better distribution plans. We learned in this process that a lot of it was just pretty ad hoc, and we want to create a statewide advisory committee that will work with each of the counties to make sure that our food and water and distribution supply plan is strong and can be implemented when there's a disaster. Just a few highlights there.
No, that's good. I wanted to ask you about the fire marshal. Thomas Heaton, who covers ag and so many other things for Civil Beat, actually was the first person, I think the only person, to report on how Hawaii is the only state without a fire marshal, although we used to have one.
Yes. And
I believe it was the legislature actually that eliminated that some time ago. Was that Civil Beat's idea then for the bill? I guess I'm wondering.
We took a lot of public testimony, did a lot of research, and I think that's one of the things that the State Fire Council also supports.
Right. Came
up with several proposals, and out of that we turned it into a bill. So we're looking forward to funding that office, getting it going. We can take advantage of a lot of federal funding that might be available to the state, and also coordinate with our military. So we are proactive, and we use the resources that are in this state when we have a fire.
About the working groups, and just one or two more questions, then I'll go on to Chris and then to Brenton. 6 working groups. I don't remember all the areas, but there was fire mitigation, the environmental
remediation,
area, right? A remediation, shelter, which is essentially housing, food, water, and other supplies, education, I think, and I'm probably missing another. But do I have it correct that the subject chairs, in other words, the chairs of education, was leading the working group on education, and same with housing, it would be the housing chair. Is that right?
We had co-chairs this time around. So Speaker included the subject matter chairs, but also included some of our new freshmen representatives, and they had the opportunity to serve in a leadership role through this process.
Got it. And does that mean then, in many ways, the bills that will be going through might well get the first hearing by the person who actually wrote the bill and was on the working group?
Yeah.
That would seem to suggest to me that it bodes well, at least for its passage in the House.
We're hoping the Senate will, because it was also a bipartisan effort. Republicans served on each of the committees and signed off on many of these bills.
Okay, one further question about the working groups. there's sort of this impression that it's a part-time legislature. Technically, it is a part-time legislature, but that's only because you meet for 60 days. And it's not even really 60 days, right? It's mid-January to early May, and really you guys start working before and so forth. How much more of a workload did that add to your colleagues in the House? Because I think the working groups were established about a month after the fires in Lahaina.
Right. Yeah. Oh, and we worked through the interim. We are definitely not a part-time legislature. It's a full-time job. If you take it seriously and you do it well, the work that Senator Lee did to create the new state park in his district, the work that Senator Awa did to create the tree planting in his community. I'm working on a master plan for the Mahelona State Hospital. We've worked on regenerative tourism in Haena in my district. These are things we do outside of the 60-day session. We are answering constituent concerns. We are trying to navigate the state bureaucracy when you are a resident in Kapa'a, Kauai, is very difficult. That's why they call us. And it's our role to help them address their issues by setting up meetings, working with state departments to answer concerns. It is nonstop. And we have piles of just a lot of constituents who come to us. We put them on hold sometimes during session. And then when we're out of session, that's when we go out, do our site visits, talk story, find out, and then create legislation.
Okay, great. Chris Lee, you're next. What's the Senate going to do? What's the priority? Obviously, we've mentioned Maui, recovery, housing, and so forth, but tell us a little bit more about the plans for your chamber.
Just building on what Nadine was talking about, being a full-time legislature and having so much work being done in the interim. We joke sometimes because once we're out of here in May, which is just basically we don't have meetings, public hearings in the Capitol as much anymore, that work still continues. And often we hear from people upset about whatever it is that they need help with. On the one hand saying, we need to fix this and that and that. Then also you're a part-time legislator and that's that. So we always joke, well, return your email in January. But the truth is, so
it's not true. Between May and January, you are doing a lot of work. Okay.
It really is. And I really want to reemphasize what Nadine's saying because, this job is, was created by the Constitution, generations ago at this point, prior to phone calls, emails, anything. And even just having the advent of the internet and going toward simple, easy email communication has, I don't know how many times, quadrupled, quintupled, or more the volume of outreach from the community that people expect responses to and deserve responses to.
It's made your job harder.
Incredibly. And I think the bandwidth that people have really means that you've got to pick and choose what you're going to focus on because you can't do it all. And that's why I think we rely on each other in the House, the Senate, and with our colleagues to work together. And you have different colleagues who have expertise in different committees, and they're able to go and really do a deep dive into an issue and do the research so that they can, get answers to things that need to be answered because we can't do it all. That said, when it comes to the Senate this year, the Maui situation obviously is, I think, expected to dominate. While the House was doing its work on the Senate side, we were doing much the same, not in formal working groups, but actually out in the community, meeting with some of the key stakeholders, doing the same kind of reconnaissance the House was doing. Senator Kyoho Kolole, who's chair of the Consumer Protection Committee, did a field hearing or meeting out in Lahaina at the invitation of residents out there to dive into insurance issues, because obviously that is top of mind. There's a lot to unpack there. So that was really helpful. Other members and stakeholders in the Lahaina community invited the Ways and Means Committee to come out, which happened a couple months ago, or actually about a month ago. And the committee went out to actually meet people firsthand, talk with some of the stakeholders who are doing and trying to figure out the path for rebuilding and what that's going to mean, what help they need. So I think between the House and the Senate this year, there's going to be a lot of effort that's built on actual input from the community to determine really where the help is going to go and where it's needed most. So I think that's definitely going to be top of mind. And we've had our colleagues who are from the area that were directly affected. Senator McKelvey, whose home was directly impacted. I know there's other House members.
Is he still living in a hotel or a resort in West Maui?
Well, I don't want to speak for him, but I know he's definitely been
And not just him,
displaced.
his family members as well,
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
Yeah. So that's something big, and a lot of this is also going to, it dovetails and really meshes with other just broader housing issues. So I think that's going to be one of the big things that we've been talking about. And we heard from the governor yesterday a big pitch for all kinds of support in the housing area in different ways.
Time's up.
Yeah, apparently.
I like that chime, though. That's a nice one. Yeah. Please continue, Chris. That's quite all right.
But and then
And
beyond
now's
that,
the time to say, silence your phones, everybody, please. Thank you. Vibrate.
yeah. But the risk is you do that, and then the next minute it's going to be your phone going off. That's sort of the botchy that comes with
I
that.
better check. Yeah.
But beyond housing and obviously homelessness, how do we fund these things is going to be a critical question. There are different methodologies and different mechanisms that can be put in place that both decrease cost to local residents and also provide resources to be able to achieve some of these things that we need to achieve. Obviously, labor is a huge issue. Thanks for joining us today.
Capiolani, not Kaiser.
Indeed. I've already seen bills to help out with that situation. In particular, I think built on the sort of nationwide SAG and actors and all the other labor disputes going on throughout the rest of the country. There was a bill put together that would help provide unemployment access to striking members under certain situations if negotiations aren't being done in good faith, for example, to provide that additional layer of support. There's all kinds of things on these fronts. And then most of all, and we've had a number of hearings also in the Senate already diving into the budget and invasive species in agriculture. Obviously, we can't, in spite of Maui and everything else, we can't let up on the pressure to continue to mitigate and deal with those spreading species like little fire ant, coconut rhinoceros beetle, all the things on the neighbor islands that are everywhere.
Rosary parakeets.
Yeah, exactly.
I missed that one. What was the last one, Nadine?
Rosary ring parakeets.
I don't even know what that one is. I haven't heard that one. I know coqui frogs.
Oh,
I
they're
know
flying
the
over
coconut
here.
rhinoceros beetle, CRB.
Yeah.
Little fire ants. And now there's another green parrot.
Yeah, green parrots.
Okay.
Scourge of the outdoors. But, all that's to say, we don't have a final, I think it's safe to say we don't have a final idea what the budget's going to look like because we're still months away from the end of session. And between now and then, our Council on Revenues, which is the group of state economists who give us our best analysis of where the economy's going and what the budget's going to look like, the available amount of revenue we're going to have, they'll report back, and those numbers fluctuate. Fortunately, so far, I think it's fair to say everyone was expecting a significant dip in the budget because of Maui, but it looks like it's not going to be as bad as it was. But I think everyone's still taking a cautious approach because anything can happen between now and then. Obviously, there was a huge difference between August 7th and 9th last year. So we want to be prepared. And I think to your point, Chad, about short form bills and everything else, I think people are treating this, from what I've seen of our colleagues, people are treating this session as an opportunity to do things and really achieve results, but still prepare and be ready because we don't know what's coming down the pipe.
No, a short form bill is not a gut and replace bill, a practice which at least one court has determined that you really shouldn't be doing that. Although the legislature has a great deal of flexibility in what it can do. I can tell you that a gut and replace is what was used to, I think, provide help for flooding in Kauai, in the northern part, after those terrible floods.
In 2018.
2018.
That's correct.
That's where they get all the rain, right? And so it can be used for good purposes, but of course it can also be used to slip things in without people looking. But a short form bill is different. It's essentially blank, isn't it? But just with a subject matter that focuses on whatever particular area. Is that right?
It literally says in the bill, the purpose of this bill is to effectuate its title, which is circular and nothing.
What does that mean?
So it's empty. So you have an opportunity to insert content, and the way that the rules both in the House and Senate work is you'll put a public notice that this bill's being heard, and there's a proposal that's going to be inserted into the bill, so you can see what that proposal is, just as you would any other regular bill. And then once that's done, it'll get referred to whatever the subject matter committee is. If it's education, go to education, or transportation, and then you'll have a normal hearing on it.
Okay, one more question before I go on to to Brenton, my former KITV colleague back in the day. And Chris, let me just ask you this. About that working group, the 6 of them that the House put together, how much did the Senate kind of go, what are they working on over there? How much did you pay attention? As you said, you guys are busy doing your own stuff, flying over to Lahaina for insurance hearings and so many other things. But how much does one chamber pay attention to the other chamber prior to session beginning?
Well, I've been here for a number of years now, and I think every year is different. Because you have different makeup. But generally, I think every legislator talks to every other legislator, right? In your own community, you have Senate members and House members that represent the same area. So you're hearing the same issues from the same community members. And if you're doing it well, you're working together to try and coordinate and collaborate. And so, especially when it comes up to big issues like Maui, I think both our chambers have definitely been listening to our Maui delegations to decide what's important and really figure out what to do. So I think there is always a good amount of coordination and collaboration going back and forth.
Great. Brenton, so just if you didn't know, Nadine's a Democrat, Chris is a Democrat, Brenton is a Republican, and he is in the Senate, still in your first term, is that right?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. What's top of mind for you? I realize it's a small caucus, there's just the 2 of you out of the 25-member Senate, but what's important to you approaching this session? Obviously Maui fires, obviously housing, the stage is yours.
Yeah, like the representative and senator said, we can talk Maui, we can talk housing, we can talk invasive species. There's so many issues, but for me, what I'd like to see and what we really push for is people and the bills that, I vote no a lot of times. I voted no almost 600 times. That's no offense to you guys.
I think you may have the record as Dr. No.
And we'll see what happens this session, but it's because a lot of what I see goes against what I believe the people that I represent anyway, the minority feel. And one of those, you see the nurses here, and I'm not for unions. Whether it's teachers or what, I'm for teachers, I'm for nurses, I'm for local people. I'm not for unions, but they're here. And last session, we passed SB 764. We basically made it easier for outside nurses to come in. And so what's worse when we see this is you see the news, and I like Hawaii News Now, and you work with Hawaii News Now. You got the partnership, and we got good relationships there, and they've been covering it. But there was a story that causes division in our community over this issue, and I know this is off topic of legislative, but it's all part of our job. It's all relative, and the media basically, I think the opening line was something to the extent of kids can't sleep in the hospitals because you guys are striking. And then you guys were blocking the buses of the people who are replacing you temporarily, which those people can make up to $11,000 in a week, coming from the outside. And they're not here, and I'm not here, representing the union or anything. I'm just talking because they're here, but you've got the media basically making them look like the bad guy, and you've got the legislature passing it to make it easy for outsiders to come in. And this is why I vote no so many times. It's just, and what can be done, because it's going to continue. Last year, there was the accountant bill. We're trying to do the same thing with accountants, right? Bring them from out of state. There's a need here. I understand that, but, we're trying to open the doors to out of state residents. That's our top priority, by the way, if any of you don't know what we push. We try to, and some of you might not believe in this, but in our area in the country, we've seen our culture basically get watered down. It's sad. So what we push is to stop outsiders from coming in every way possible. And so when it comes to jobs, I see you guys. What you're fighting for. And that's what, regardless of Maui, regardless of, invasive species, we can't keep dividing our communities through what we do, through the media. And so, what I'm here to do right now, matter of fact, Chad, because you with the news, and I know you guys are always looking for those nuggets, what you guys are going to write
That's
for.
That's what we call them, actually.
And, and I got a little bit of time. And so I got the governor's.
Give me some nuggets, Brad.
I got the governor's number right here. I got a proposal for him. We'll see if he answers. If his communications team is watching, don't warn him yet. The reason why I'm contacting the governor is, as a state senator, what am I going to do, right? What am I going to do? We're not here to talk and just talk and get reelected and all that. We're here to do stuff right now while we got the keys. And so I'll call him up because you're his people. and I'm a senator with his number. So we'll see if he answers. If he answers,
You're going to call him right now?
Right now, we'll get a live proposal. They might get upset about this, but I think we have enough respect. If he's not busy, maybe we'll see what happens.
We're actually not live, by the way. We're
We're
recording,
not live?
but that's all right.
Okay.
If it's him, you got to put him on speaker.
It is. Governor Green, are you there? Well, he answered. Let me try one more time. You guys want to try one more time?
He said it's Brenton. Click.
Let me see. Let me try one more time.
Yeah.
Sorry, I still got time. But basically, what I'm gonna try and ask him here. Let's see.
We've never done this before.
Oh, well, I went to a message. Well, I guess, I'll leave the message here. Governor Green, I know we typically go through Brooke. I'm calling you right now. We're not live, but this is recorded on the Civil Cafe with Civil Beat. And I wanted to call you and throw a proposal your way. We've got nurses in here. That's your field, and that's the reason why I'm calling you. As a senator, I can't do much in the minority party, but I know that you're friends with the CEO of HPH. And so if you can influence him to, get these nurses what they want, and also put a moratorium through your emergency housing order on outsiders purchasing our property. If you can do that, I'll give up my job. And that is a legit offer to the governor, because I know they don't, they want as much Democrats in these seats as possible.
Okay.
Thanks, Gov.
Thank you, Brenton. Any of you guys live in District 23? That was novel. My first question for you, you probably won't be expecting this, but what made you cut your hair? Because your hair was looking pretty long there for a while.
Shoot, I don't want to waste my time talking about my hair, but it started with the cuckoo. The cuckoo, they got this thing, the rugby cut, and so that was a representative of them. And when I cut it, the summer just got hot. I'm growing it back, though.
Okay, all right. One other question. There is actually no Senate minority leader. You and Kurt Favela have not been able to recognize on who is leading your two-person caucus. Any update on that?
I know, it sounds funny, just on the national level, and you jump into it on the local level. I don't want to get into all the details. The advertiser, I think you guys may have covered it already, but there's been stories. It's just, we come in with a different philosophy, and so there's a different mindset, and when you have two people in a position of deciding who's going to be leader, and yet it's basically going in different directions, well, how is anybody going to come and bridge that? It's that far difference. But and Senator Favela is not here, so I can't, I don't want to go read the paper. The paper has a good summary. Not to throw it at your guys' competitors, but to not take up time on that. There's a good article that explains all of that.
I do have to ask you, though, does it weaken the influence either of you or the two of you have in the 25-member Senate?
I don't look at, these bills. All I can do is try to stop what we believe are bad bills. That's really all I can do. I can't pass bills. Republicans don't pass bills. I'm a realist. I'm not coming in here and spending all my time on bills. We have really good bills, I think, by the way, that you guys might think is crazy. We'll see. But one of them is real easy, is planting food trees. We put it in 70, like you mentioned, Rep. In Kahalu, Ulu, and Mountain Apple. We see so many rubbish trees all over the place, and we're going to continue to do this in our community. But when you're talking about, has it made it hard? No, because they give us so many keys as a senator. They tell you when you come in, you're drinking water out of a fire hose. If you're going to get shot in the face, or you're going to figure out how to actually drink, right? So if I just stood there and went through the motion and really put all my efforts into all these bills only to get shut down by the end of the session, I just wasted January through May. Okay. And we're going to really be in the community still. That's the kind of team we hired.
Thanks, Brenton. We're going to go to a couple of questions from our readers. These are pre-questions. And any of you, or none of you, neither of you, whoever wants to answer question number one: when are you going to legalize recreational pot? I am an alcoholic and cannot drink alcohol. It's a real question, not making it up.
Well, I'll jump in.
Go ahead.
I've already seen at least 2 bills introduced so far this year, and there have been bills introduced probably the last 5 or 6 years at least, I think, going back. And the Senate passed bills the last 2 years to do that. I know the Attorney General and the Governor have been working on other language, so there's definitely going to be hearings. Personally, I'm hoping we get it done, because the bottom line is, it's out there, and anybody who's grown up in Hawaii knows you can get it anywhere. But I think what's been proven through the medical dispensary program is that you can create a product that is consistent and safe. And that's the bottom line. You don't know what you're getting on the street corner from whoever or from uncle whatever, but you do know what you're getting in a clinically regulated setting. And so if we can create a system that allows access for everybody that is safer and can generate revenue to pay for schools and roads and other things and reduce the cost to taxpayers overall, that's a win. And so I think there's a good conversation to be had about that. I know other people have other concerns and other feelings, but I think it comes down to whether or not the community steps up to the plate and gets involved in the process. And I think that's really what the legislature is all about.
We've had medical marijuana for a long time. Took us a while to get dispensaries. We do have a decriminalization law that is already on the books to possess a small amount of money. If I remember correctly, and I'm going to you, Nadine, it has been the Senate that has been moving the recreational marijuana, but it has stalled in the House in recent sessions. I hear David Tarnas, however, the Judiciary and Labor Chair, might be working on this. Can you bring us up to date on the House perspective on recreational marijuana?
I think, every year the Senate passes over a bill, and I think last year every single state agency sent in letters of opposition to those bills. So what we're happy about this year is that the Attorney General assigned a staff person to focus on writing a bill that would take into account lessons learned from, I think it's like 17 or 24 other states that now have legalized adult use cannabis. And they visited Massachusetts. They learned, what do we do to make sure the problems that they've experienced in other states that we can avoid. And so I think we have a much stronger bill, but it still has flaws because we've been receiving a lot of emails from the hemp industry saying that we do not want to be bundled in as part of this AG initiated bill, but I think it's going to be introduced in the Senate. So we know there's probably, needs additional work to be done. I know that there are representatives who support adult use cannabis, legalizing it, and then there are those who are very concerned about the enforcement end of it and concerns about being what some consider to be a gateway drug. So it's going to be an interesting discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Nadine. Brenton.
Weighing on this topic, I will say that we have a bill. When you mentioned the enforcement, the FBI came down and they raided one of our medical marijuana plants, factories, I don't know what you call them, farms, grow sites that sold out in Waialua. And that farm had been selling, if you go in and you look for an ounce, I don't know how many of you are aware of how you buy it and what it costs, but if you look for an ounce, over there is about $150, roughly. It really depends on what they have. You go into the dispensary and that same strain can be about $450. So, last year there was that bill, was it your bill, Chris? Whose bill was it? Was the year before? But anyway, last session I had voted yes and no in the same committee to a bill, just to allow the conversation to advance. But my fear there would have been that we do what the state did when the medical marijuana dispensaries started, and we gave licenses to people who had money, and iced out the local people. And so that's the concern with me. I know Senator Keohukaloele has got a bill coming out. We just signed on to that one. That's the AG's one. And there are licenses that would go to locals in that. So, we'll follow that process along. But that would be my concern about it.
Okay, great. And you guys always feel free to interject or if you have a follow-up. But let's move on to another hot topic. Why is it so difficult to totally ban fireworks, which are so harmful to residents' health, seniors' sanity, animals, and veterans? Who wants to take that one?
No, it's an explosive topic, Chad. I think going back to before I was around, before I was born, Hawaii's had a long affinity for celebrating New Year's, 4th of July, kid's first birthday,
Chinese New Year.
every Wednesday. I mean, whatever. But how it's done, I think, is a question. And when there's an impact on other neighbors around you, right, that's where you get into this discussion. There have been a number of efforts over the years in different ways to try and create enforcement or penalties, to create noise ordinances or other things, or empower counties. Obviously, with the last few years, they aren't entirely successful. So it's hard to say what's going to work. I think part of the process here is that everything's experimental, right? You don't know what policy is going to actually affect, but you try your best. I think for the neighbor islands in particular, there's a different culture than someone who's living in like downtown Kaka'ako or Waikiki. So there's a really difficult challenge to create like a one-size-fits-all policy, and a ban statewide automatically probably isn't gonna pass like that as a result. But there are things you can do to try and help folks who are impacted, folks who have pets, for example, or issues with PTSD or other sorts of things. Also, what we've learned over the years is that transportation and enforcement is one of those key places to try and figure out how to deal with this. Just thanks to the House and Senate and Governor working together the last few years, we created a new Department of Law Enforcement, which has a broader focus on interdiction for illicit things coming into the state, including fireworks.
This is the new office that separates the prisons and corrections.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So, and there's been some success. I think you're just in the news the last a few months. There have been a number of seizures of containers of fireworks and things coming in. Obviously, that's one small piece of the puzzle, but ultimately, what we've learned also is that because Hawaii is a state that is so dependent on imported, not just commodities, but food and other things, which we want to get off of, to be clear. We want to be self-sustaining and sufficient here in Hawaii. But until we get there, we really need our ports to operate quickly and efficiently. When you talk to the folks down there, they go from having a ship pull up to unloading it to getting those goods onto trucks out to the grocery stores or wherever it's going in a matter of hours. It's very, very fast. So trying to figure out how you can meaningfully intercept stuff coming in is a challenge logistically. There are places on the West Coast and others that at least I've had a chance to visit, and some of our colleagues have visited, where there's new technology, scanners that, for example, search for radiation and other sorts of things. When you're looking for explosives or nuclear material or other, really dangerous stuff, that you can just drive a truck through, so it doesn't require unloading a whole container to figure it out or all of that.
And if it catches something, then you pull them aside and you do a search.
Right. So there are ways to do it. We're not quite there yet, but we're in the process of actually completely redoing our harbors to make them more efficient, more less costly, I should say, to operate and help the operator. So there's opportunity, but we're not quite there yet with some of those technologies.
Gotcha. Before I ask Nadine and Brenton if they would respond, a reminder that if you've already filled out your question, your little white card, get them to one of the folks in a green Civil Beach shirt, because they then got to punch them in so they magically appear on my screen over here. There's Ashley there, and there's Megan, and then there's Asia. By the way, can I just shout out how great my coworkers are? A round of applause for the Civil Beach team. Hi, Kat. You see us reporters all the time, but these are the guys that really hold the office together, the business team. Fireworks. Nadine?
Yeah, I would agree with Chris's assessment that the creation of the Department of Law Enforcement and then the task force that worked on interdiction did a lot of work in a short period of time. And they need, I think, additional funding and support in order to do better work. It's a start. And I know in my mother's neighborhood in Aliamanu, there was still a lot of fireworks, but it wasn't throughout the day. It was pretty much at midnight.
On Oahu.
On Oahu.
Windward side,
where
yeah.
my mother lived, Aliamanu, near Salt Lake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
so,
this side, yeah.
Yeah. So I think they need the resources to do the work and do more of it.
Okay.
And so
Very good. Brenton, any word on fireworks?
Yes. The governor did text me back, though. He just said to reach out to Brooke or Blake.
Brooke is the chief of staff, by the way. And who was the other person?
Blake.
Blake Oshiro, used to sit here in this building. So, hey, at least he got back to you,
Yeah.
right?
When it comes to fireworks, and you got to get the other side of it, honestly, after this New Year's, and I want to take some heat probably from some people in the room, but because I get dogs and asthma and all of that, but I was getting calls from constituents irritated that HPD was showing up to their houses, stopping them from popping what they bought. I got like several calls about that. This country's a little different, yeah. I know we still get the calls on the other side too of, hey, what are you guys going to do about fireworks? But that's a battle that I'll really stay out of, because when you're on the freeway and you see like how many people is blowing it up. I'm not here to ban and rain on people's parades. That's why, as a kid in the country, we stayed far away from this place.
Nope. Honest answer. I appreciate that. Here's a question from one of you folks. What should the legislature do this session to finally tackle funding for cesspool conversions, polluting our nearshore and drinking waters and harming the coral reefs upon which we all depend? This is particularly a pronounced issue on the Big Island, but all three of you have rural districts in many ways. I know it's city as well, but comment, what's the latest on cesspools? Seems like we've been talking about this issue for a long time now. Do you want to go first, Nadine? Because is it a big
You
deal?
want to go
Kauai?
one, or you want to do two? Okay. So there are 83,000 cesspools.
What? Statewide?
Statewide, and they emit 50 million gallons of raw sewage into our environment every day. This is a major concern, and I'm hoping this year will be the year we pass some meaningful cesspool regulations. Over the interim, one of my pet projects was working on this, because in Kapa'a, in my neighborhood, we are on cesspools. And so one of the things that we would like to do is to ask the Department of Health. We've been working very closely with the Department of Health and the counties, because they have a role in all of this, to help to require the counties to do wastewater management plans. We require the counties to do solid waste management plans every 5 years and to update them. We do not ask the counties to do anything regarding wastewater management. And so this is one component of the bill. Another component of the bill is to ask cesspool owners to authorize the counties to charge a cesspool pollution fee to cesspool owners. Because if you're on the sewer system, you pay a monthly fee. My mother in Alimanu pays over $100 a month. But me in Kapa'a, I pay zero. But I am contributing to the poor nearshore water quality in the Kapa'a area and Wailua area. And in some areas, you're potentially impacting safe drinking water. So the authorization to the counties, whether they choose to use this or not, is to raise some funds to assist with cesspool conversions for people with low incomes. If the county chooses, hopefully they will identify those areas that could potentially connect to the sewer system, sewer treatment plants. They could use that as connection fees, because we've heard in Eva Beach, that's a problem. People coming up with $10,000 to connect to a sewer system. So those are some of the components of the bill to help owners understand whether the county has a plan to connect. And if not, then I need to, if I'm in a priority district, but the county doesn't prioritize a connection to a sewer treatment plant, then I need to, on my own, convert to a Department of Health approved individual wastewater system. And so this will be information to help everyone in the public understand what to do and sort of the timing for a potential connection.
Okay, thank you. Anything you would add, Brenton or Chris?
Just real quick, we had a bill that we're going to put in, but you guys are the ones who control everything and the monies, but to establish a fund where, to try to influence people to convert. Obviously, we know how much it costs, and we can't just fine people and take their property away. We did have that bill, but again, going to Senator Keoho Kolole, my neighbor, he introduced something, so we signed on to that.
Okay.
So hopefully that goes through.
Okay, Chris, anything on that?
I'm pooped, Chad. Talking about this crappy issue, but you got to keep yourself entertained. You know, there's so many serious issues, but it is a serious issue because, you know, despite how we get there, and there's a lot of different things that Nadine talked about, different strategies and mechanisms and tools. The bottom line is if we don't achieve what we're setting out to achieve in stopping the pollution of our nearshore waters, so kids stop getting sick swimming out in this stuff, and secondly, to protect our aquifers and to protect, especially in rural areas where you have reliance on wells and things like that, we're going to end up paying as a state far more than what it costs to convert, because we'll need to convert everything else to have those safety measures in place. I mean, it's like, do we pay a lot later? Do we pay some now? And how do we balance that so that it doesn't affect people and affect families in a negative way between now and then?
Okay. We're approaching the 1 o'clock mark. Great conversation here. You guys have been terrific. This is one each from our readers. We'll start with Brenton. Aloha kako, mahalo Senator Awa. They spelled your name wrong. For all you are doing, your last name, for the island of Oahu, my question is, can we get our commercial use permits to teach surfing on the North Shore? This is a city and county issue. The city and county passed Bill 34 that stopped the permits from being issued unfairly and unconstitutionally. Thank you, good Senator. P.S. Great planting those trees. Love it. Aloha. So yeah, it's a city and county issue, but it is definitely a North Shore issue, teaching surfing on the North Shore.
This one is actually, we were working on it, but let me back up. It is a city issue, but it's also a state issue with the DLNR. And there was something that one had to do with the other. I don't have all the information on the top of my head, but the person that we were working with in the DLNR just left, the deputy, Laura Ka'akua. So I don't know where that leaves us with that situation, because we weren't making any progress. What it came down to was they couldn't go through the city because they didn't have approval to be in the water in these certain areas from the state.
Got it. Okay. Chris, we brought this up earlier, but I'll just read it from a reader. Coconut rhinoceros beetle, coqui frogs, particularly a problem in your district in Waimanalo, little fire ants as well. What's the plan? I know your colleague, Jared Keohokalole, is working on this, but can you give us a little update on invasive species?
Yeah, we've been working not only with Senator Keohokalole, who's been really on the ball on this one, but also Rep. Martin from the House, who also represents the Waimanalo area. There's been a proliferation, I think, far beyond what people thought was possible in the last few years. There are massive populations of coqui frogs, and we've had, I hate to say it, but we've had nurseries in the area selling little fire ant-laden vegetation and plants and things like that, which is unfortunately help spread things all around. So we are all affected. And so there are a number of bills. Senator Keohokalole has a number. I've introduced a couple. I know Rep. Martin and our ag chairs have been working on it to do a whole lot of things. On the enforcement side, putting in resources to be able to effectively combat and control. And then also, how do you staff up so that you have these multiple different agencies, right? You have DLNR that has some responsibility through the invasive species councils, and you have the Department of Agriculture, which has got its share of the effort, and they all need to coordinate and they all need to be aligned. And if at any point resources run out, like, we are all screwed, because you lay off of one of these things for even a number of months, and then it's going to cost you twice as much or 3 times as much the effort, time, money to try and control whatever it is in that space. And we saw that recently. And there have been some great successes. In Waimanalo about a year or 2 ago, there was a point where Department of Ag was running out of money. And so they were potentially going to have to back off their control of the coqui frog. And so we worked together with everybody and pulled DLNR and the invasive species councils together with them, and they were able to stand up an operation that went and tried to continue to fill that gap, so there wasn't time when things could really go unchecked. And while that's definitely just keeping things at a moderate level, it's still expanding and still a problem more than ever. So we know that there's going to be considerable effort, I think, this legislative session to deal with these things, because if we don't, it will be an even bigger issue the next.
Okay. Nadine, for you, Representative Nakamura, how will you balance the overall housing needs in Hawaii for each island with the needs on Maui and Lahaina? That's quite a loaded question, but very appropriate. And I know you've taken a lead on housing.
Thank you. Before I do that, Ellie Cochran, she's here. Just wanted to recognize Representative Ellie Cochran from Lahaina. Thank you for joining us. Ellie set up a hub immediately after the fires, and I think, she has definitely relayed the concern for the need of housing in this area. We have in our majority package a bill to provide more housing, more funding to the rental housing revolving fund, the Tier 2 program, which was established a couple years ago. And we would like to fund it because it is the only fund that addresses working families. And to survive in Hawaii, we need to be working. And we've been really focusing, and rightly so, focusing on housing for the very low income, because that's where we have federal financing available. But here we know that there's a need for affordable rental housing for working families, and that's in our majority package. It's something we would like to fund as much as possible, and then we are starting to identify those projects, especially on Maui. We are focusing on where we have resources, infrastructure, so that we can. But it is a need statewide.
Okay, thank you very much. And hello, Ellie Cochran, and best mahalo, aloha to your family and friends back in Lahaina. Tough times, we're all praying for you guys, even for those who don't pray. A question to each of you. This one is actually for me. Chris, what's the difference between serving in the House and serving in the Senate? You've done both now.
Oh, that's easy. The carpet's blue in the Senate, and the carpet is red in the House.
Red or brown? That's a great question. Brenton, for you, you do have this very large district. I want to say it's Kaneohe to Mokuleia. Is that roughly right?
Yep.
And through Wailua, obviously. How do you canvass that? How do you walk your district when it's so big?
Yes, so I lost 25 pounds when I did it.
Yes, you did.
I'm not gonna do it again. Now I'm just doing the work that they elected me to do.
And then Nadine, this is for you because you're the only person on our panel from a neighbor island. What's that commute like? How tough is that? Because not only do you have to fly over here, but you got to find a place to live, drive, and so forth. How onerous is that?
It's tough. It's tough for our neighbor island representatives and senators. You have to maintain 2 households, one here, one on Kauai for me. You wake up in the morning and you have to ask yourself, what island am I on? Figure out what you have in the refrigerator in each island, because it's like, oh, I thought I bought this. Oh no, it was actually at Costco Honolulu. So it's a tough thing to do, especially during session. And I give the neighbor island representatives a lot of credit, because it's a tough thing to do.
What if we had full session for a week or so on every island, like Kauai? Maybe they could go. Is it the War Memorial? Is that the big auditorium there in Lihue, and so forth? What about that idea? Just fly everybody over to the neighbor island, put them up. Just to break up the routine, maybe.
I think it would be a lot more costly because there's a lot more Oahu representatives. But I like the idea. I think the neighbor island folks would love it.
One more question for Chris, because you had such a softball the first time around. You chair the Transportation and Culture and the Arts Committee. How on earth is transportation and cultural and arts combined together in one committee?
Surprisingly, there's a ton of overlap, which I only discovered once those two sectors kind of collided. Yeah. So it's transportation, culture, and arts, but under that, there's also international affairs as a subject matter.
That's in yours as well? Mm-hmm. I'll be darned.
And so that falls under culture and arts. But
international affairs falls under culture and the arts?
Right. It's culture and arts, and it's true in both the House and the Senate, set up that way. And that's historically just been the case for going way back. But, when we think about international affairs, all our Pacific Rim partners, Japan, Korea, and all the South Pacific and so on, we have strong not only cultural ties and relationships, but economic ties as well, right? We depend on them for exports, to export what we have here and our value-added products and things like that. We depend on tourists coming here to a degree to help keep our economy going. And so transportation is the key that ties that all together. So we do a lot of work, surprisingly, with airlines and airports to try and make sure that there's a smooth path forward. And, we were just in Taiwan recently, talking with their leadership about restarting service, which had been suspended since COVID. We were in Japan, and while the yen is quite weak, so we have fewer Japanese visitors right now. We're meeting with their transportation, both transportation and tourism officials, to figure out really what we can do together to make sure that we can have the same level of spending here in Hawaii that we've traditionally relied upon. And so there's actually a surprising amount of work that goes into it that you wouldn't otherwise suspect.
No, that is news to me. Thanks for sharing that. I did ask each of our lawmakers to bring up an issue that a bill, legislation, a pet issue, if you will, that's important to them or to their constituents. I think we'll start with Nadine, if that's okay.
Yeah, I was going to talk about cesspools, but I can talk about.
We should definitely talk about schools. Let me just make a note to come back.
I was going to talk about cesspools, but we covered that earlier.
Cesspools, not schools.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I will. One of the bills that I'm introducing is to give dental hygienists the opportunity to do sealants for our children attending public schools. So right now you have to be under the guidance of a dentist, and that makes it hard to deliver the services to students who need them, and that will prevent tooth decay. And so that's one of the bills that it's important to, I think, all students throughout the state.
Thank you, and thanks for applause for that. And thank you for clarifying how important the cesspool issue was.
And I think and that's also, I think, part of the Keiki Caucus bill.
Got it. Brenton, an issue important to your district or to you yourself?
Yeah, so we have 5 bills that go towards preventing outsiders from coming in and buying our properties in some form or another. I just posted about that on the social media if you want the bill numbers. On top of that, I have a resolution that I really hope can get your vote, Chris. But so we planted those food trees, and we want to see more food being used in our government spaces where it's applicable, where we have water and it can grow. And so I'm gonna introduce a resolution to try to change Senate policy to require that all senators coming in plant 1 food tree in their district per term. The reason why 1 is because if they can do 1, that means then everybody can follow, right? They break that barrier, whatever the barriers may be. And there was a lot of barriers when we tried to do it. So that one. And then one more, Chad, because this one is kind of wild.
Yeah.
But we believe in it. OHA has it on their website, CNHA. They held their conference and they talked about the census and the number of native Hawaiians that continue to leave the state. What was it, some 7-8% more than it was in previous 10 years?
It's enormous in Las Vegas, of course, Southern California.
Yeah, and so we're coming out with, last year was the About Time bill for the homes. This year is the Kanaka Clause. And what this bill is sort of like a term limit in a way, where if we as legislators allow that percentage to continue at the rate that it's been, then all of us would be ineligible for our next upcoming election.
Okay. Chris, pet issue to your district.
I'm going to switch gears. There's a lot of stuff that's important, but this one I think has traditionally not gotten the attention it deserves, and that's getting our youth engaged in civics. And for all that we talk about Hawaii not voting and being slow to the polls and all of that, I think there's an opportunity still really to engage our next generation. So what the bill does is empowers the DOE to have students selected from high schools around Oahu to serve on neighborhood boards along with other neighborhood board members, so that somewhere in government at some level, students and youth have a voice that is heard. Because right now, obviously 18 is the cutoff, and you cannot serve in government. You cannot have the same, you cannot vote. You can't do a lot of things. And often there are really good ideas, and there are a whole different set of issues that youth growing up today, when you think about housing and healthcare and everything, protecting our environment, that have as their priorities that often aren't articulated in the same way that anyone else can just show up and call up a representative in an election and say, hey, I'm going to vote for you if kind of situation. So it's one way to really get kids engaged in a new way, not even kids, young adults at the high school level that we've not, I think, experienced before.
That's very interesting and nice to get people out to recruit our youth to be public servants, to get involved in the civil society. Question for all three of you. Will this legislature institute public financing for political office seekers? And this is comprehensive public financing. We do have a partial public financing system in the state. This is what Carl Rhodes is pushing again. This reader says this is yet another reason we have mainly incumbents in political office. This bill almost made it, died during that cattle call last year, but the idea is to make it very competitive. If you can raise enough money, then the state will match you, and it goes up more for each race. So by the time you get to the LG or governor, it's a pretty competitive amount of money. Publicly financed elections. Anyone who wants to answer that question?
Sure, I'll jump in. I think part of the biggest so first of all, this is not the first time we've been discussing this as a legislature. It's gone back for some time.
I think it died in this room, actually. But anyway.
But one of the barriers, we're in a House conference room?
Oh, it was the big House conference room.
Yeah.
You're right.
But one of the biggest barriers is where do you find the money to pay for that? And I think there are some good lessons to learn from other places because we do have a partial financing system in place, but
inadequate. Not many people take advantage of it, but we do have one.
But right. So obviously there was a pilot program on the Big Island maybe like 10 years ago or something that ran for 3 years, where council members. I may be remembering this incorrectly, but council members, I think, received a greater portion of their funding from public funding. But other states like Arizona and others actually fund theirs through fines. So, if you get a DUI or whatever you normally get a fine for, a small portion of that would go into this fund. That way, it's not taxpayer dollars directly financing, which is a concern for a lot of people because they don't want their dollars used to fund someone running against what they believe in necessarily. And so that's been a really controversial thing around the country. But I think there is opportunity to look at ways to actually get the money to make a system that's functional, because ultimately, the more people who are engaged with, and the more the elections are based on ideas, the better.
Okay, Nadine or Brenton, this publicly financed elections bill, comprehensive.
I remember when they had this press conference and I joined in support. And the reason I supported is not so much that I believe that that's the tool, that's the best way for elections, but because it's only an option, right? It remains an option. And I believe that should just be the way it is. Because when you have, it's not an even playing field, even to have it as an option. Yeah, it's better. But if everybody was under that and everybody, you had to go raise small amounts to, qualify for whatever the number is, then everybody would be even. And so that's why I supported that bill, even though it was an option.
The idea is leveling the playing field. Nadine?
When I first ran for the Kauai County Council back in 2010, I took advantage of the partial public financing program, and that helped me to
Did
get
you win
into,
that race?
I did.
Ah.
Yes. So I do support partial public financing. The bill as written, I believe, is flawed, and I would not support it.
Carl Rhodes' bill currently.
Yes, currently. And I think I've talked to Carl, we've had a discussion, and he's made his points and I've made mine. My main concern is that in looking at the data from the 2022 election, and I wanted to share this with you, Chad, because I know Civil Beat has been very vocal in support of this.
It's so true.
That in the lieutenant governor's race, the average, or let's say the median amount raised was close to $900,000 for the Democratic candidates. On the Republican side, the median raised was $24,000. Under this scheme, both Democrat and Republican would get $804,000 in publicly financed, public funds, your taxpayer dollars. Why would we want to do that? I have some concerns about that. I believe taxpayers, once they look at this data, would raise the similar concerns. Look at the governor's race. Median amount raised on the Democratic side,
$3.5 million. On the Republican side, $285,000. Under the report as written, they will get $1.6 million to play with, both sides.
Are you worried the Republicans might drive out Democrats then?
I think that we would be giving an unfair taxpayer dollars to a Republican who would not on their own have the support from the community to raise these funds.
Although you do have to, it's essentially matching funds, right? You do have to.
No, these are not matching funds. You have to come up with $5 donations in a lieutenant
you're
governor's
saying it's
race,
highly disproportionate then.
3,000
I see.
signatures
Okay.
of $5. So it's not quite matching.
I know Brenton wants to answer, and then Chris, but Brenton, you go first.
So I don't know if I'll be lining up with where the concern is, but when I look at the people, we know that, what was it, 33% of people voted last time around? So the majority of people aren't voting. And a lot of these people are in the minority because they don't believe in government. You know, Hawaiians, 9% of Hawaiians voted. Hawaiians don't believe typically in the United States government. And so when we talk about numbers like this, well, is it worth it? It's coming from it's coming from their taxes too. Even though they're not voters, we still represent them. That's all I want to add.
Chris.
I was just going to add, there's a big piece of this discussion that's missing and often is overlooked because candidates, we have some of the most strict candidate fundraising laws in the country here in Hawaii. So as a candidate, you report exactly the money you're getting, who it's coming from, where you're spending it, and you do that on a pretty regular basis through any election. But what there's basically no control over, even today, is outside dark money coming into races, being spent like that way blows away the amount of money that a candidate could ever raise themselves. So you have companies and corporations and super PACs spending millions of dollars in races around the country right now, where candidates themselves are raising like $50,000. Right? It doesn't matter like ultimately how much money you raise or where it's from. You could just never possibly compete. And we're starting to see that in Hawaii, and in particular. We've got large investments, financial investments being made in Hawaii by, you have Amazon, which is or probably the biggest company, in the United States right now, behind maybe like only Tesla, I'm not sure, but who have a financial vested interest to getting involved politically, and they're able to put tons of money into, and I don't mean to single them out, there's like everybody's doing it, and putting money into races and having meaningful impacts at the local level, not just at a presidential level. And that especially is concerning because ultimately, 90% of the decisions that are made that affect all our lives on a daily basis, what kind of roads we drive on, what kind of schools we have, do we have access to healthcare, what kind of jobs, all of that's made at the local level, right? It's not always Congress or the president that decides everything. So how do we start to take a look and meaningfully influence where those outside dollars from outside Hawaii are pouring in and what influence they're going to have? There are ways to do things, I think, that would be far more meaningful than we probably imagine we're capable of right now. And that's being already game tested in other states around the country who are trying to put in place measures to not only create transparency about where that money's coming from in our elections, and often it's not identified, right? It's like some super PAC that's got donations from some nonprofit or whatever, to not only create transparency in that space, but then also put limits on what that can do and the ways it can be spent. Because that ultimately we have almost no transparency or control over right now.
Okay, we could talk so much more about this issue. Nadine, I want to compliment you for having been prepared for that question. And I will think about what you had to say. It will be one of the top issues, I believe, during this session. Just a couple of quick ones because we are running out of time.
And I'd like to share that information with you.
We will be contacting you, particularly when that bill crosses over to the House. I assume that it will. Real quickly, because we just got to get to these things. This is from a reader. Sunshine law for the legislature?
I've been serving here for a number of years now, and I've had a lot of friends who've served on the councils that I've got to meet over the years. There is, I think it's easy to say like, oh, well, everything should be in the state capitol, the same laws that apply to the councils. That functionally just would not work. logistically, even if we wanted to do it, it would cease the ability to actually pass stuff in
And
reasonable
why,
measure.
quickly, why wouldn't it?
So partly because, so it's the way
Is it the
sunshine
sheer
law,
size of the
it's
legislature?
both the sheer size, right? You have 51 members in the House, you have 25 members in the Senate. Being able to have a meaningful discussion that gets into the nuances of anything, you really often got to go in one-on-one and go through the details. If you were to do that in what is basically a noticed public hearing every single time, the hearings would go for like days. So when you have 3,000 bills or something that are up for consideration, I know there's been calls also to make sure there's a hearing on every single bill. That just means it's impossible, like just logistically impossible. That said, there's not reason not to have, I think, more understanding of what's happening and transparency and decision making, which I think the House and Senate, both in the rules amendments the last couple of years and the laws that we passed the last year or two, I think there were like dozens of them, tried to create. But ultimately, being able to limit more than like 2 legislators from being in the same place at the same time somewhere just functionally doesn't work when there's 76 represent, and you have like 5 or 6 that represent the same community in some cases. There has to be a different way.
Okay, Nadine or Brenton on sunshine law applying to the legislature, which it does not.
I mean, automatic, my answer, right? Coming from a fellow journalist,
your
you just
answer.
open the door. That's
Open the
what
door.
you do. And you got to deal with it, just like social media and everything else that's moving. So I understand, Chris, that the process and stuff. But times change. We need transparency. Hawaii just came up on some corruption list as the top. So something's got to change. We deal with the social media and the fast pace and all those additions to life. We'll just have to deal with the doors open.
Okay, Nadine.
When I was on the Kauai County Council, I was subject to the Sunshine Law that the legislature passed. And I believe it would be very difficult to do it. I agree with Chris on this one, that because of the 60-day session, because things move so quickly, we start off with 3,000 bills, and we'll, at the end of the day, maybe, 200 to 300 may pass. There is just not enough. We don't have that luxury. Maybe if you made it a year-round legislative session, maybe if you made other changes to this, but as currently designed, it would be functionally difficult to do.
Got it.
Yeah, and let me reiterate, if the question becomes how do we functionally do that and build that into the process, then it does mean a discussion about changing the very nature of the legislature from part-time to more professional, full-time, year-round body. And that changes everything and opens up opportunity.
We'd have to have a lot more civil cafes. One last question, and then a final point from each of you that you haven't had a chance to make. Another exception that the legislature doesn't have, the council and the mayor and the councils and mayors and so forth have, is that you do not have term limits. It has been proposed. It'll be proposed again. Already there is a bill out there. What's your view on term limits for the House and Senate? Brenton.
Oh, we put a bill in for term limits. Our goal was to get it heard. It didn't happen in the Senate, but hopefully, Carl Rhodes will change, which I doubt on that one. I respect Carl, but yeah, we're for that.
Got it. Nadine?
I'm personally against term limits. I feel that you can vote at the ballot box, and it has, incumbents have lost races, so the incumbents get in because they're doing their job. They're serving their communities. They're doing the hard work, not just during this 60-day session, but when they get out, they're working full time, and then that's why the voters are voting them in. So I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing that incumbents are working in here. I think it's a good thing, because if not, who would be running the show?
Thank you.
Bureaucrats?
Bureaucrats.
Or lobbyists, because they will have the institutional knowledge that's needed for a organization that is $19 billion of revenue. So really, is that what you want, to have lobbyists running this, or bureaucrats who may not change or do things progressively to make things better?
Got it.
Real quick to add to that, we can choose to not meet with lobbyists. There's a sign on my door. I was told by one of your guys' leaders, matter of fact, when I asked, well, why do people meet with lobbyists? And he told me for votes and for money. That was a Democrat leader.
Fair enough. Chris, term limits.
For a number of years, I've introduced bills for term limits. Having been kind of through the ringer on trying to get that passed, and then ultimately realizing that to Nadine's point, there are actually cons that come with it. I think there's better ways to go. So, for example, like we had talked about dealing with money in politics,
Right.
but ultimately, what we see in states that actually have this, and this is important because there are a number of states that have term limits of like 8, 12 years or some other variation. What Nadine says is actually true. When we talk to colleagues, Republican and Democrat in those states, you find out that they come in, they're there. By the time they figure out the system, like 4 or 6 years in, I feel like it took me about 6 years to understand the way that the system actually works and how to be effective here in Hawaii. It's the same pretty much everywhere. By the time you get there, you're pretty much out the door, or you've got just a couple years, which means the decisions that are being made are by staff, by and large. They prep the reports. They know how to work the system to get what they want done. And so it ends up being relationships between a lot of the lobbyists and the bureaucracy. And the elected leaders are sort of on the back end of it, and often are only serving as maybe a veto to something that they've stuck all this other stuff in without people really realizing. And that's why in states, both Republican and Democrat on the mainland over the last couple decades, you've had a number of states move from term limits to repealing them, going back to a system where people can elect the elected officials who can serve and actually lead the state and put a check and a brake on the influence of lobbyists and other stakeholders in the process that aren't elected. And that's why there have been a number of analyses from universities and other institutions that have looked at the relationship between, does term limits in a state mean better effective government or less bribery or corruption? And the answer has been consistently no, there's not a correlation there.
Okay. That's so tempting to respond to, but I won't. We're almost out of time. A final word. We'll reverse the order as we began, but any final point that you didn't get to make, Brenton, and then Nadine, and then we'll end with Chris.
No, we're just hopeful that, like I said, if I could do one thing here, one tangible thing that we've already done in our community, I hope that more lawmakers will jump on board with planting the food trees. It's a very difficult battle when you hear attorneys say every reason why not to do it, and we did it. And so I hope the others, we're gonna try and do some things to make it more of a streamlined process.
Great, Nadine.
Housing, affordable housing, and homelessness. If we do not address these problems head on as a state, we are going to lose out on economic development. We're not going to have teachers who can teach here, afford to teach here, healthcare workers who can find housing here. This impacts the entire economy and our kids' futures. So we have to focus on affordable housing and homelessness.
Okay, Chris.
When we talk about how we improve government, whether it's these conversations about campaign finance or access to services or whatever it might be, the bottom line is, we are here as members of the community serving in the structure that's created by our Constitution and our laws. We can't change this by ourselves, even just passing a bill, right? We need the community's support when anything needs to change. It cannot be done otherwise. And that's true of changing the Constitution if folks want to talk about year-round legislatures. It's true of putting fruit trees all around the state if we want to pass a bill. It only happens when we're empowered by the communities. That means when you guys show up, when anyone as a citizen can rightfully come in, even just give us a call or send an email, testify on a bill, that's what makes the difference. And government's difficult. It seems like it's something that's impossible to change, but the only reason I'm still in this, I think because of all the headache and pain that comes with it sometimes, is because I've seen individuals stand up and make a difference. And I think that's true no matter who you are, no matter what party you belong to, no matter whether you're from Oahu or a neighbor island or anything. It's the public showing up and paying attention and getting involved that makes the difference.
Okay, very well said. A big mahalo to Senator Brenton Awa, Representative Nadine Nakamura, and Senator Chris Lee. Please, everyone. Have they called New Hampshire yet? Okay. Final word here. Just a reminder that we will be back midway March 6th with our Civil Cafe on how things are going at the halfway mark, and a wrap up on May the 7th. And I just want to say personally, you guys are great. I mean, you guys are really, really good. And you guys stayed for the whole time. That's amazing. So take care, everybody. Thanks so much.